Hi, my name's Sarah Hawtrey. I did a PhD in the medical school in what used to be the Department of Infection and Immunity, looking at epigenetic regulation in rheumatoid arthritis. I'm now a clinical scientist working for the NHS, specialising in genetics. So during my PhD, I found that my skills weren't particularly based to the style of working in a research environment, and I would prefer to move to a career that was a bit more patient involved and a bit more clinically relevant. So I found that being a clinical scientist offered me this change. So prior to doing my PhD, I was already aware of the clinical scientist programme, which is the training programme that leads to be a clinical scientist. And towards the end of my PhD, I became very interested in doing this as a further step. So I looked into what was required in the personal specifications for the training programme and made sure I got involved in lots of different activities during my PhD, which provided me with experience for this, such as the SURE scheme, which allowed me to mentor different students. And there was lots of different doctoral development programmes which allowed me to increase my skills, which I could then use as transferable skills to get on the scientist training programme. So to enable myself to make the transition between my PhD and the career I wanted in clinical science, I tried to speak to clinical scientists that were currently in post to speak to them about what was already happening in the career and what kind of developments and technological advances were happening within the NHS. So I just did that via email and contacted them. I also managed to contact some labs to be able to arrange a visit to get to have a look around the labs, as lab placements weren't available and aren't available within the NHS. I also did a lot of online searches and did some careers talks that were based at the medical school. There is also now an open day based at the clinical scientist department to be able to allow people to come in for a day and hear presentations from current trainees. So if you're thinking about making a career transition to being a clinical scientist, I'd make sure you really understand what the career involves. So in order to become a registered clinical scientist, you have to go through the accredited scientist training programme scheme, which is a 3-year training programme. So it's quite a lot of commitment, so you need to make sure you understand what the training programme involves and what the career at the end of it is and whether it will suit you, because it's a long time to commit. So a typical day in my job at the minute is generally kind of 9 to 5 working. You are expected to work occasional extra hours. It would involve a lot of genetic analysis, so looking at sample outputs from sequencing, from karyotyping, and understanding what abnormalities, if any, are present. And then as a scientist, you're also heavily involved in reporting these, so producing a paper report which gets sent to the clinician so they can interpret what you found. Part of my job also involves booking in samples, so you actually get to deal with the samples and decide what testing they go for. But as a clinical scientist, you're not practically involved in the lab work. It's more the analytical and reporting side. You also get the opportunity to train others, so I currently train some of the new trainees that have come in our department. What I like best about my job is that every day is different. So although you're doing similar types of analysis every day, each patient offers a completely different problem and a different scenario to deal with. So every day you have different reports to write and different scenarios that you have to understand. It's also constantly about learning, so with each different report you're writing, you're constantly updating your knowledge about what's in the literature and what best determines the prognosis for patients. So one of the main challenges with my job is the amount of samples we get. So the NHS has a lot of samples coming through every day, and this is basically ever increasing. So we constantly have a workload to battle against, with staff numbers remaining the same. Another challenge coming from a research background is that we don't actually do a lot of research work, which I feel could be incorporated into our daily routine. So it's a bit of a different challenge to what I was used to during my PhD. So the skills I gained during my PhD, which have definitely helped me during my time as a clinical scientist, is a lot to do with time management and independence. So during your PhD, you're forced to do a lot of work on your own and manage your day-to-day activities and organise it exactly how you wish. So transitioning to being a clinical scientist, although you have a lot more tasks set, it makes it a lot more easier to organise your day with these skills already. Also, the SURE scheme at the medical school has allowed me to increase my management skills and leadership skills, and also increase my teamwork skills, as I worked in a very small team as part of my PhD. So having another body in the lab helped me increase my ability to work with the team. So I'm currently a clinical scientist, but there are many other options of ways to change your career. So there's a senior clinical scientist, you can become head of department, head of service, and you can also be a trainer for various different trainees within the department. You can become part of external schemes which we use to assess our quality. There are various different roles within the department that you can choose to add on to your clinical scientist role to develop your skills in other ways. So if you're interested in being a clinical scientist, I'd make sure you do your research, so really understand what the career involves and particularly what the training programme involves, and decide whether it's right for you and it's what you need, and whether your skills are suited to it, because it's a lot of commitment to 3 years training and then the post at the end of it. I'd also consider, if you're unsure about your experience, there's a master's course run by MBB in molecular and human genetics, and that's a really good basis for understanding what we do as clinical scientists in genetics, as it's run by an ex-clinical geneticist. There are also different roles within our department that aren't clinical scientists, so you can become a genetic technologist if you're more interested in being within the lab. This gives you a different opportunity to do different skills if you're more interested in being more practically based. And for that you don't need a training programme, you can just apply straight from your undergraduate degree. So I've currently only just started being a clinical scientist that's registered. So my career aims would be to become a senior scientist within the department. Perhaps with a side role, you can also do a research role part-time. It's also something I'd consider. But genetics is currently in a very changeable position at the moment due to designation within UK labs all over the country. So I actually think genetics will change vastly over the next 5 years. So it'll be interesting to see how the jobs change and what jobs are available in 5 years' time.